Welcome back. I'm Lane Casey. This week we're going to do a special edition show over the 9/11 events. We have some teachers that are going to share with us where they were, what they were doing, and how it affected them and their families. As you all know, there's always events in your life that you remember, especially where you were and when you heard the news. And this is one of those events. So 9/11 was a very historic event. Where were you that day?
I was actually a freshman here at Union City, and I was in a vehicle on the way to school, and I heard it on the radio that a plane hit the World Trade Center towers, and then I didn't really think a lot of it at that moment.
9/11 attacks, I was actually, before I started teaching, I was working for a company changing commercial air filters on businesses and schools and things like that. And I was actually in Stillwater in between two jobs.
On 9/11, the first I heard about it, I was on my way to school, coming down 152 towards Union City, heard it on the radio. When I got to school, we went to class. My room was in Schmidt's room now. And I remember about an hour later, they called over the intercom and said we could all come into the library.
But when I got to school and we did the announcements, our principal at the time, Mr. Tate, had us all go to the old library halfway through first hour, I think, and we watched it on the TV basically the rest of the day. And me being a freshman at the time, I didn't realize how big of a deal it was.
I was in college at Southwestern in Weatherford, and I was getting ready to go to class, and I had quite a few friends that lived in the same complex, and someone came over to my apartment and said that a plane had crashed in New York City. And so we turned on the TV, and we were all watching when we saw the second plane crash, and it was very upsetting for all of us.
We still had a tournament for baseball, junior high baseball tournament at Ninnekah that we played in, and it was just it was very different. The sky was super clear that day. There wasn't any planes in the air that afternoon. It was just very eerie.
And I was sitting there watching the TV before they opened, and the second plane had just hit into the second tower. And I was just stunned. I had no idea.
None of us went to class that day. We all just sat and watched the television and watched everything unfolding on TV.
And I had about 3 or 4 more stops the rest of the day, and I don't remember the rest of the day. I was just amazed, listening to the radio the whole time, wondering what was going on.
So you remember that day pretty vividly. What else do you say you remember?
I remember when I got home from my game that day, really realizing the magnitude of what had happened. A lot of jobs and sporting events and any event around the country had shut down for a couple weeks or a week or two. It was just very, very strange. But that's kind of when it really hit me, like, that's how big of a deal this was.
You know, everyone just became a lot more cautious about things and stuff after that day.
What's next? Who's next? Where it's coming from? All that. It was just a crazy time, and my heart went out to a lot of people, and was really worried about what was going on in the world that time, especially in our nation.
I will never forget that day. It was a Tuesday. I'll never forget the weather. I'll never forget all the little things that happened at school, just kind of watching on TV and getting home and watching the news that night. And then one thing that really will stick out to me is the days, weeks, months, years after that, our country really got very patriotic. You would see American flags on cars. You'd see the red, white, and blue colors everywhere. So that's something that I will never forget.
Not this summer, but last summer, went to a teachers conference, and we ended up going to New York for a couple of days with my family, and we were touring New York and walking around downtown, and we went to the 9/11 site. And nobody tells you to be quiet, but once you kind of walk on the site, everybody's quiet. There's a waterfall, and you can just hear it's peaceful, but at the time, it's just surreal, and you're thinking about everything. and a lot of sadness comes over you, and it's just an experience that is just kind of hard to explain.
We all went in there, they had a TV on, and we watched the news and watched everything that was going on till about noon that day. And it was just really, everybody was really quiet, and everything changed because, you know, you don't think about those kind of things. You don't think about your freedoms and stuff that much because it just kind of take it for granted until that day.
But at that time, all the emotions come back from almost 20 years later. It's a different experience. Very sad experience, but then again, you've seen it, so it's something I'll never forget.
And I was in 8th grade when the Murrah building bombing took place, and it was very similar to the feelings that I was going through at that time. And so I completed a class this summer in crisis and disaster counseling, and I had to watch and listen to 9/11 videos and recordings from inside the cockpit, and it brought back a lot of those same memories. You just feel helpless watching, knowing that there's nothing you can do.
First off, thank you teachers for that insight of how 9/11 affected your life.
We want to always remember those affected by this tragedy.
Our hearts are out to all those people who lost something that day.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll be back next week.